All right, so you know how sometimes you just feel like overwhelmed by all the news and everything going on? Like you just want to understand the bigger picture without getting bogged down in all the noise.
Totally. It can feel like you're drowning in information.
Yeah, exactly. So what we're doing today is like a focused deep dive. We're going to take one story that starts small, almost like a tiny little mystery, but it unfolds into this huge ecological crisis that, has impacts all across the globe.
Yeah, and it all starts with this seemingly isolated incident that ends up, unraveling this crucial understanding of just how interconnected our world has become. So imagine this. March 2007, a cave in upstate New York.
Okay.
Biologists are doing their routine bat count, and they come across something totally alarming.
Like what?
Their initial reports back to their supervisor, Al Hicks, were pretty frantic. They're like, holy crap, there are dead bats everywhere.
I mean, can you imagine? You go into a place and it's just like death.
Yeah, and Hicks, he's understandably skeptical at first. He's like, really? Is this just normal winter mortality? He's not buying it.
Yeah.
So he tells the team, bring back some samples, document everything you're seeing. And when he gets the photos, it's totally clear that this is not normal. This is something completely new.
So what do they look like?
The bats look like they had stuck their noses in a bag of flour covered in this white powder. It was weird, this white fuzz. And these are experienced bat specialists. They've never seen anything like it. Hicks starts sharing these pictures with his colleagues, and everyone's like, what is that? And no one has a clue.
So it's a mystery.
Total mystery. And it's not like one of those things that just disappears when it gets warmer. As the bats come out of hibernation, the mystery remains.
Right.
And then the following winter, the problem explodes. It just goes crazy. This white powder is showing up in tons of caves, multiple states. It's spreading like wildfire. And the impact on the bat populations is just devastating. We're talking losses of over 90% in some hibernation sites. There's this one cave in Vermont where they found thousands of dead bats just piled up like snowdrifts.
That's a really disturbing image.
It's awful. It's a full-blown ecological crisis.
Yeah.
Of course, scientists launch a huge investigation. And finally, they figured out what's causing it. It's a cold-loving fungus. Basically, a microbe that loves the cold.
Oh, wow.
And the evidence suggests it was accidentally brought over to the U.S., probably from Europe, so it's an invasive species. They give this new fungus a scientific name, Geomyces destructans.
That's ominous.
It is. The name basically tells you what it does. It's a destroyer.
So this whole thing with the bats, it raises a really fundamental question that scientists have been wrestling with for a long time. How do species end up where they are? And what happens when those natural boundaries get crossed?
Right. And this takes us all the way back to Darwin. Charles Darwin. The evolution guy.
Oh, yeah, of course.
It's fascinating. Darwin was one of the first to really recognize how important geography is in shaping life on Earth. He saw that even in places with similar climates, like South America, Africa, and Australia, you have totally different plants and animals.
Makes sense.
Right. The oceans, they act like these giant walls. They keep species separated. So over millions of years, they evolve in their own unique ways. And that's why we see such incredible biodiversity on different continents.
So that explains the variety. But how did anything get to places like the Galapagos Islands?
Yeah. Darwin was obsessed with that. He was like, how did life get to these remote islands hundreds of miles from anywhere? He spent years doing all sorts of crazy experiments.
Like what?
Trying to figure out how seeds could survive in salt water, if little creatures could hitch rides on birds. He even had his kids count baby snails stuck to ducks' feet.
That's interesting.
Right. He was really trying to understand the limits of natural dispersal. Because he knew that while some species can slowly expand their range over time, those geographical barriers, those are the key to understanding why life is so diverse.
It's like those flightless birds, right? Rayas in South America, ostriches in Africa, emus in Australia. They're all related, but they evolved separately because they were isolated.
Exactly. And then, fast forward a few decades after Darwin, we have this revolution in our understanding of the Earth itself. Plate tectonics, the idea that continents drift.
Oh, yeah, Pangaea.
Exactly. Alfred Wegener proposed this idea that all the continents were once joined together in this massive supercontinent, and everyone thought he was nuts.
Really?
Yeah, but he was right. Plate tectonics eventually proved him right. And this whole history of continents slowly moving and separating, it really highlights just how important those geographical barriers have been in shaping life for millions and millions of years.
So we have these slow, massive geological forces that control where species can and can't go. But now, here we are in the Anthropocene, And humans are basically tearing down those boundaries at warp speed.
Totally. It's like we've hit fast forward on evolution.
Think about how much global trade and travel there is. It's estimated that every day, like 10,000 different species are being moved around the world just in the ballast water of ships.
It's mind-boggling.
One cargo ship can undo millions of years of separation in a matter of hours.
Anthony Ricciardi, who's an expert in invasive species, calls this a mass invasion event. It's basically a global reshuffling of life, and it's happening faster than ever before.
And this isn't just some abstract concept for me. I actually lived pretty close to that cave in upstate New York where they first found white nose syndrome. And a few years back, I got to participate in a bat census.
Oh, wow. Tell me about that.
It was a pretty powerful experience. It was a cold, gray morning. We drove up into the Adirondacks to this place called the Barton Hill Mine. It's an old, abandoned iron mine from the 1800s. The entrance was up this snowy slope. There was a group of us, maybe a dozen people, mostly biologists, some from the state, some federal, and even a novelist doing research for a book.
Interesting group.
Yeah. We were waiting for the novelist who was kind of struggling through the snow, and the conversation turned to like all the things that could go wrong in an abandoned mine, falling rocks, bad air, that kind of stuff.
Makes sense.
So we finally get to the entrance, and it's just this big, dark hole in the side of the hill. The first thing I noticed was all the bird droppings and animal tracks around the opening. Like ravens and coyotes had figured out it was a good place to find a meal.
Kind of a grim sign.
Yeah. So we put on our helmets and headlamps and head into this long tunnel. It's dark, damp, timbers all over the place, bats flying around in the dim light. Hicks, the biologist, kept reminding us to watch our step, because there were some pretty steep drops. The tunnel eventually opened up into these bigger chambers. Some of them even had names. One was called Guano Hall. The goal there was to try to photograph as many of the hibernating bats as we could and collect samples, both live and dead ones.
That's important data.
Yeah. We mostly saw little brown bats. I call them lucis for short.
Yeah.
They're usually the most common type in the Northeast. We also saw some small-footed bats. They had these cool dark masks around their eyes. And even a few Indiana bats, which were already endangered even before white nose showed up.
Sad.
Yeah, it was. As we moved through the mine, we'd inevitably wake up some of the bats.
Yeah.
And they'd make these tiny squeaking noises and rustling sounds. And, despite the name white nose syndrome, we saw a lot of bats with that white fungus on their wings and ears, too.
So it's not just their noses.
Right. And those bats got collected, too, for more research.
Yeah.
Being there, seeing all the death and the disease on the surviving bats, it really hit home just how badly this introduced fungus was messing up what was once a healthy ecosystem.
It's a powerful reminder of how fragile these systems can be.
Totally. And this whole issue with invasive species, it's not just bats. I mean, just looking out my window here in western Massachusetts, I can see tons of plants that aren't native. You've got your grasses, dandelions everywhere, garlic, mustard, broadleaf plantains.
Plantains, yeah.
Native Americans used to call them white men's footsteps because they seem to pop up wherever Europeans went. There's multiflora rose, Queen Anne's lace, burdock, oriental, bittersweet. It's crazy. Studies have shown that almost a third of all plant species in Massachusetts are from somewhere else.
That's a lot.
And it's not just plants. We have invasive insects, too.
Yeah.
The Asian longhorn beetle, the emerald ash borer. They're killing our native trees. And in our lakes and rivers, there's the zebra mussel. They clog up pikes and mess up the food web. They even have campaigns now like Stop Aquatic Hitchhikers to try to teach people how to prevent them from spreading.
It's a big problem. And it's worldwide, right? You mentioned the DAISY database in Europe, and there are marine species tracking systems all over. Australia's been fighting the cane toad for ages. They even have these methods for getting rid of them humanely, like refrigerating and then freezing them. And they've even found non-native seeds in Antarctica.
That's wild.
It really shows you how far-reaching this is.
Some biologists call it the new Pangaea. By moving all these species around so fast, we're basically undoing millions of years of continental drift. We're creating one giant interconnected global ecosystem where things are mixing that never would have before.
It's like we're scrambling the whole planet.
Yeah. And speaking of which, I also got to visit Aeolus Cave in Vermont. It used to be the biggest bat hibernation spot in all of New England before white nose hit.
I've heard of that place.
It was.
Yeah.
Well, it was really different from the Barton Hill mine. Way more heartbreaking. We had to take snowmobiles to get there up this winding trail through the woods. Even though it was freezing, I saw a few bats flying around near the entrance, which already seemed bad.
Not a good sign.
Yeah. This guy, Scott Darling, He's with Vermont Fish and Wildlife. He was leading the trip. And he made everyone put on latex gloves and full-body Tyvek suits before we even went in. At first, I thought it was a bit much, but I quickly understood why.
So what was it like inside?
Aeolus is this huge cave, carved out by water over who knows how long. The main entrance is blocked off with these iron bars to keep people out. When we squeezed through the opening, the first thing I felt was that I was stepping on dead bats, like a carpet of them.
Oh, wow.
It was eerie. The main chamber, Guano Hall, was massive. Giant icicles hanging from the ceiling, huge ice formations rising from the floor. And everywhere you looked, dead bats. Some of them were frozen into the ice. There were still some live bats hanging around, but a lot of them seemed confused, flying all crazy. It's hard to imagine that this was once a thriving place.
That's so sad.
Yeah, it was. We spent hours carefully collecting the dead bats, trying to count them and get samples. The number of dead bats was just unbelievable, and it got worse the deeper we went. I remember leaving, and Hicks joked, "Try not to step on any dead bats." And it took me a second to realize he was kidding, because they were literally everywhere.
Dark humor.
Yeah, definitely. At one point, I saw a live bat kind of nuzzling a bunch of dead ones. It was really hard to see.
That's a powerful image. And this whole thing about bats hibernating together in these big groups, that's probably why the fungus spread so easily, right?
Yeah, they're all crammed together so the fungus can jump from bat to bat. Plus, it can live in the cave itself, so even more bats get infected. We went back to Aeolus the following year, and the numbers were just devastating. In Guano Hall, they only counted 112 live bats. That's down from hundreds of thousands. And little brown bats only have one pup a year, so bouncing back from that is going to be a long shot.
That's terrible.
It is. But there might be a glimmer of hope. They've actually found Geomyces destructans in Europe too, but some of the bats there, like the greater mouse-eared bat, they seem to be doing okay.
Interesting.
Yeah. It makes scientists think that maybe some European bats have evolved some resistance to the fungus because they've been living with it for a long time.
That makes sense.
So that's some good news for research, but here in New England, things are still really bad. Little brown bats, northern long-eared bats, tricolored bats, they're all listed as endangered in Vermont now. I talked to Scott Darling recently, and he said the situation is desperate. He showed me pictures of the same spot in Guano Hall year after year. You see these big clusters of bats, then just a few, then almost none. It's like watching a species disappear before your eyes.
This whole thing with white nose syndrome, it really highlights the unintended consequences of this global movement of species we were talking about. It might seem like introducing a new species is just adding to the mix, but it can have these ripple effects that we can't predict.
And as Charles Elton said, this kind of homogenization could actually lead to a less diverse, less rich world in the long run.
It's like we're simplifying the planet's ecosystem.
Yeah. But, you know, if we think really far ahead, millions of years from now, who knows what might happen? Imagine if global travel changed drastically. The continents could drift apart again. Islands could become isolated. And maybe, just maybe, new species could evolve from all this mixing we're seeing now.
It's a fascinating thought.
Like, what if giant rats took over Hawaii? Or Australia was ruled by supersized rabbits?
It makes you wonder what the future holds.
It really does. And that brings us to a question for you, our listener. As we're creating this new Pangaea, what are the long-term consequences going to be? What unexpected things might happen from these seemingly small actions? And what responsibility do we have as the ones driving all this change? It's something to think about as we navigate this rapidly changing world.
It's a question we all need to grapple with.
Absolutely.